Hello, everyone. My name is Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and I'm excited to be here today. Our guest is excited to be here today. If you could see what I saw in the green room, she's dancing, so I know today is going to be fun. And it almost didn't happen. Oh my goodness. It was like this back and forth. Can you do it the hint? Anyway, I am very excited that we finally get to meet. We finally get to have our conversation and we get to share it with you. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our special guest today, Lunden Souza. Welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Hey, Julie. This is so funny. I didn't know you could see me in the green room, but you're real in the beginning. I was like, oh, I need to bust a move, get myself ready and excited for the show. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your flexibility with both of our schedules, trying to find some time to provide value here today. I am so excited to be here.
I'm excited you're here. And like I said, that was really cool. I know every time I see a guest dance, I'm like, all right, she's my people or he's my people. I'm like, let's have some fun. So without further ado, I'd love to just start out with my normal question. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your own wellness journey?
Yeah, thanks so much. So I started my wellness journey when I was 17. I went away to college. Was doing a lot of things on my own for the first time, adulting, if you will, for the first time, and discovered that, going out for a run, exercising, eating well was really helping me cope with the newness that my life brought. And I just really found my groove when it came to fitness. And so I started using fitness as a tool for everything. If I was happy or excited, I would go for a run. If I was stressed or something was bothering me, hit the gym. If I was, tired and needed a little oomph. And I started realizing that I was trying to build everything with a hammer. And I was also doing that with my clients. I became a personal trainer. I was really convinced that you just have to work out. You're just not working out consistently enough. If you're not getting that, you're just not, being consistent enough. And what I found is that, including myself and people I was working with, is we were really trying to fix the inside by working on the outside. And okay, if my body looks a certain way, then I will be X, Y, or Z. And I just really found that was a dead end. That was not a recipe to not live a fully fulfilled life. Now, do I think fitness is wonderful? Healthy nutrition is amazing? Absolutely. But I now see them as tools in our toolbox. And when it comes to my personal wellness journey, I, went through a lot of hormonal difficulties, a lot of family issues, and a lot of things that presented themselves to me where I realized you can't work this one out, Lunden. You can't just go to the gym and work this out away. And so I really transitioned into from fitness, personal trainer. Now I'm a master NLP practitioner. I work on communication and comfort zones, and I have my podcast to really put the message out there that there are a lot of tools that we need to live a happy and fulfilled life. And when we get clear about the person that we want to be and how that person shows up in the world, then the body follows. And that's really been the magic and the miracle that I've experienced, that I've also helped my clients unlock. And so it really went from helping people who were like, I want to fix this, or I want to fix this, or this piece is ugly on my body, so I want to fix this. And it really transitioned into working with people who just want to lead better, love better, communicate better, show up better in their lives. And yes, working out is a phenomenal tool. And there are so many other tools that I love to help my clients reveal for themselves. And that's really kind of the fast forward, if you will, of my journey. But it was really trying to do all the things to look a particular way, to feel a type of way, only to realize, hey, the feeling comes first, the vision comes first, and then kind of the matter follows, if you will.
I love that. I'm always preaching that because I was working full time as a personal trainer for years, and it was the same thing. It's like, even if people reach their goals, they still don't have that feeling that they thought it was going to give them. And it's like an elusive carrot that is always, what's next to so-called fix. And nobody's broken.
Agreed. I agree. I love that statement. I don't believe that people are broken. I really believe that all the tools that we need are really inside of us. It's just that we don't sit down and tune in long enough to decide, hey, is this working for me or is this not working for me? Am I getting my desired outcome or am I not? And if I'm not, why do I find myself going in that same loop trying to get a different result? People find themselves in that spiral of like more exercise, less eat, all the things, trying to get this different result. That I like to kind of break that spiral, if you will, and kind of unravel it a little bit, untie some of those tight knots that think we have to do things a certain type of way in order to get said outcome.
As you were saying that, I was thinking of something in particular, and it just finally dawned on me. I worked in addiction recovery for 6 years, and there's this thing where when you full on have an addiction to drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever it may be, most of the time people then, and I call it Jesus and gyms, because all of a sudden the addiction turns to God and it turns to the gym, and it's like, wait a second though, your brain hasn't changed yet. At least you're picking way healthier things to focus on. But it's like, it's still that internal work that needs to be done. It's not, it's just how it's showing up on the outside that's a little bit different. So I love that you have transitioned into, recognizing that it's a tool and also adding more tools to the toolbox.
Absolutely. I feel like that's more empowering too, because I think people, and maybe, people watching or listening, feel so frustrated because it's like, I've been doing all the workouts, I've been getting 10,000 steps, I've been doing all the things. And I don't know, for me, it really felt like wow, there's more options. I don't have to keep running up and hitting my head up against the same wall, looking for a different outcome. And so hopefully anyone listening feels a little bit of that sense of relief that I did when I was like, okay, there's more options and more tools.
Exactly. Now you mentioned NLP. So for those people that are watching, I'd love for you to explain what that is. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but
no, I actually think it's fairly simple. Actually, NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro, our brain, linguistic, the words that we use, and the programming, and recognizing that we do have a programming. And if we find that that programming is leading us to unempowering results, then we have this job, should we choose to take it, to change the way that our model of the world might view things, to change the words that we say and utilize in the world to elicit a different nervous system response. And so I often call the work that I do, it's like putting in little speed bumps, getting you to slow down. I think people with their communication, with the way that they think, their belief system, their internal representation of the world. I lived in Europe for a long time, in Austria near Germany. And in Germany, they have the Autobahn, which is like the freeway that has no speed limit. You can drive as fast as you want. And I think people are going on the Autobahn full force, not even taking a moment to decide, like, is this the direction I want to go? Is this like where I want to be headed? Is this cool for me? And so I like NLP to think of it as kind of like speed bumps, to be like, okay, I got to stop. I kind of got to look both ways. Okay, I'm going to go over. Okay, what's next? And I think people, until they realize it, they haven't taken a moment to be like, oh yeah, what are my beliefs? What is my model of the world? What is my internal representation? And how is it, how is that manifesting in my physical reality? And if I don't like it, how can I go back to the drawing board? And so I feel like NLP is everything. It is that drawing board. It is that combination of our thoughts and our words, our nervous system response, and then the way that it's delivered into the world in a way that hopefully we can be super freaking proud and excited of.
I like that. I've never heard it described, but as like speed bumps. I think that's a fabulous way to simply explain it to people, because that's exactly, it's stopping and taking a look. Okay. Because a lot of people are like, no, that's just how it is. That's just how the world is.
Yeah, this is the road I drive on. This is the way that it goes. I know what it looks like. I know every turn. I can go on cruise control. And, I know a lot of cars can kind of drive themselves now here, but I think a lot of people live their lives that way. It's just like, that's just the way that it is. That's the way that I was raised. That's the way that I decided at some point that the world works. And I grew up in a family where it was like, this is the way the world works and this is what we believe and that's it. And it wasn't until, I was in my late 20s, 30s where I realized like, actually, like, I'm in control. I'm the owner and operator of this system, and I can choose if that model of the world is inspiring and empowering for me or not. And that's really where I feel like my transition from fitness into NLP really took roots for me, because this was real for me. This was in my family, right? This was the thing that I was dealing with. And the more that I started to share that with people, it's like, oh yeah, I never realized I could believe something different or think something different or have a different outcome. And if we're talking about fitness and wellness and things like that, I think there's a lot of embedded programmings in our family line and in our genetics that say, either this type of body type means this. If you do this, then you are this. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but people will be like, oh, you're obsessed. You work out every day, and they have this own model of the world of people that work out. Or from the other perspective, there's some people who, hit the gym 7 days, no days off. And if you're not, you're lazy. I don't know if that's a very empowering model of the world either. So I think, just kind of acknowledging the programming and deciding if it fits you and if it suits you, great. Because people complain and blame and want to point at all things outside of them. You got to change. This has got to be a type of way. You got to be this way. It's your fault that I had a bad day and now I'm this. It's like, I feel like NLP is pure ownership. It's pure ownership.
I love ownership. I mean, it's kind of like, it's a lot to acknowledge and take on, but it's also empowering, because then nobody else can take away my joy or my happiness or anything along those lines. And it really is it is perception. A lot of the world is perception, whether we believe it or not. I know that for me, I'm going to use like the total typical example. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. I used to get so mad, and that wasn't a feeling that I wanted to feel. I can't stop somebody else from doing something. As long as I'm safe and I'm okay, why do I really care? And so then I tried the model of, well, maybe they're in an emergency where they've got it, they're getting to the hospital. And I didn't like that one either, because I thought, well, that's negative. So I changed it to maybe they have to poop. And as soon as I did that, now I'm laughing. I'm like, hey, we've all been there. It's an emergency situation.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
Yeah, how could we get in the way of someone's bowel movement? That would just be horrendous. I would never want to do that.
I know you don't want to go in your pants. Go right on ahead. And it's funny, and it made it so much easier now when anybody does something like that. I'm like, oh, whatever. I don't know. Like it's all the story I'm telling myself anyway, so I might as well make it fun or funny.
I love that.
I don't know.
It's hysterical. And you have forever changed my brain by saying that, because I'm for sure going to think of that now. And that's a really great example of a reframe in NLP. It's just like choosing to see it differently, reframe it, put it in a different picture frame, and look at it differently. And I think the car example, even though it's very like mundane every day, it's a wonderful example, because in my quest to communicate better and just to be more kind and less reactive, my autopilot when people cut me off is to cuss them out and flip them off. Okay. Now, have I stopped that? A little bit, but what's also funny is I'll do that. I'll say a cuss word, I'll flip them off or whatever. And then I'll be like, sorry, I love you. I didn't mean it. You're amazing. I hope you have the best day ever. So that's my speed bump right now. Have I fully not reacted in the way that I normally did? Well, not always. I'm human and sometimes I mess up, but it's been really wonderful to know, okay, I might still go back to the old programming, but that old programming always knocks over the I love you, I'm sorry, I hope you have a good day. So at least I've kind of habit stacked, if you will, or kind of communication stacked. Like if I'm going to get triggered by someone in the car while I'm driving and I actually go on that autopilot and I lash out, I at least know that the lash is followed by a I love you, you're amazing. And then I laugh at myself, and then I'm going to think about them going poop. So it's going to be hysterical.
I love that. Yeah, it's true. And like you said, it's just automatic. It's not even, and something that I started doing too, because I'm in the car a lot. So, something I would get mad, or I start cussing somebody out, and then I'm thinking, would I say that to their face? No. And then the other thing I think about too is, am I actually even mad? No, I'm actually not even mad, but it's just so like my automatic response. It's like, that was interesting.
Yeah, I think acknowledging those automatic responses is wonderful. And if anyone listening now, it's like, think about some of your automatic responses, whether it's to someone in the car or your partner when they might do or say something, or your kids or whatever. think about and just choose one at a time, right? I always say, like, we can't fix, not fix, but we can't change everything all at once. So maybe people listening and watching now can think of, oh yeah, there's this one autopilot move that I just, it's not who I want to be, but I keep doing it. So I'm just going to focus on that one. And I'm going to make sure that every time that happens, it doesn't go past my awareness. It might happen, I might do it, but I'm always going to have the awareness that I can do better. And I think that's really powerful.
I'm glad you said that too, because a lot of people, when they start, and I've noticed this, is that they'll start trying to become aware of it, and then they shame themselves every time they actually have, that automatic response. It's like, that's not helpful either. But if you can acknowledge that it's there, it gets better. You're already a step ahead than you were before. So let's celebrate that. And like you said, I'm not going to let it get back past me without at least me noticing. That is it's a goal that's achievable, and you can move forward from that. So I'm glad you said that, because I just know a lot of people that shame themselves. So
yeah. And I think that is so real. A lot of people do that in fitness. If they miss a workout, oh my gosh, I'm horrible. If I desired to communicate in one way and it didn't come out a particular way, oh my gosh. And I think of two songs when it comes to NLP. The first one is the Anti-Hero from Taylor Swift, which is like, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. And then Aaliyah, for anybody that remembers Aaliyah, the late R&B artist. And she's like, dust yourself off and try again. You can dust it off and try again. So I remember that. It's like, it's up to me to take that ownership, and it's also up to me to like dust myself off and try again. And one of the things that really comes to mind is family situations. I have changed tremendously in the last, I would say, like 8 to 10 years. And, over the course of this journey in my life, like I said, my family, especially extended family, or just like culturally, hasn't always been receptive to the change, right? So there was many times where I would feel like, okay, I'd been doing my meditations, I had been, doing all of the internal work, getting 8 hours of sleep, doing my journaling, doing my breath work, like doing all the things that I know help me cultivate greatness in my life, with the people I work with the people I'm in relationship with. But like, family is really challenging. And somebody told me one time, they're like, you think you found your and then go stay with your family for a week, right? And I can imagine so many times where I went to Christmas, went to Thanksgiving, went to visit my family, and reverted to old programming. Or I'd be there for 5 or 6 days, and like 3 days I was good, and then the other 3 days everything would fall apart. And at first I was beating myself up, but then I was like, this is the work, Lunden. Like, and then I had to go back to my history in fitness and be like, I never expected that I was going to get, tighter legs and a firmer butt from doing one squat, or even one workout with squats, or even one leg day workout. So why in the heck am I expecting that in this new way of communicating, that I'm just going to go in with people who are used to my programming, who I've been programmed with, if you will, or kind of in that program soup, are just going to be on board, and I'm going to be perfect, and the interaction is going to be great. No, there's a lot of moments where you go in as this new version of yourself that you want to be, you believe in who you're becoming, and then you go into situations and it's like, psh, psh, psh. And I feel like that's kind of your practice. That's you putting in the reps. Those are the bicep curls for your brain that really help you, just kind of get in the game, if you will, instead of being on the sidelines. So if anybody's dealing with shame, tell yourself, I'm in the game. That's why. If I was on the benches and I was in the sidelines, I would have nothing to be ashamed about, because I wouldn't be trying. I wouldn't be trying and failing. So I always tell myself that when I get in that shame soup or that shame spiral, I'm like, that's because you're in the game, Lunden. That's because you're playing. That's because you're in the arena. You're not on the sidelines. You're not in the, in the nosebleed section yelling things from the stands. No, I'm in the game. I'm a player in the game. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to have learnings, and I'm going to keep playing the game.
I love that. That is so well said. On that note, it is time for us to go to a commercial break. So we're going to be back in just a minute. For those of you who are watching us live, thank you so much for being here. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation. We're going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to ask Lunden about if her perception changed by living abroad, and how, the United States is kind of its own little curtain, and there's a totally different environment here. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and continue the conversation after these messages. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I'm Julianne Meyer. You're watching Own Your Wellness, and today's amazing, special, awesome guest is Lunden Souza. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So glad to have you here. I love your enthusiasm and your passion. It's very contagious, even through the screen. So
I love that. If I'm going to make anything contagious, I want it to be that, right?
I love that. So before the commercial break, I touched on the fact that, you lived in Europe, and so did I. And it is a different animal. And it's like, even in the United States, depending on where you live, there's different cultures and things like that. But when you get to Europe, it's a different system of how things are done. And I was curious if you could share, how did that change your perception of the world?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I think that living abroad and moving abroad, I lived there for almost 7 years, was the best decision I could have ever made. Not because I think, it's not necessarily, I don't know, my intention to say like if one was better or the other, but the opportunity that I got by moving to Austria was I was able to work for an Austrian startup that ended up growing immensely and then getting bought by Adidas. And so it was like an explosion of amazingness. And we had, I think, over 40 different nations of people working in our office. And so I think the beauty of me being able to live abroad was being able to interact with all different types of cultures and belief systems and people and the way that they operate and learning about their programming or their rituals and things like that. And like I said before, I grew up in a family where it's like, this is who we are, this is what we believe, and like everybody else is weird or like different and not us, And I really found that being in Europe was so wonderful because I was able to engage with people who were very different than me. And yes, it was very different. I lived in Austria, so the Austrian culture is, let's say, not as bubbly as maybe I am, So I remember that was a little bit challenging because I would go into grocery stores and I'd see the same lady every time. And I'd want to say things to her, but she would just ring up everything and it'd be as if, she was just talking to a wall or whatever. But I learned that that's how Austrians are. They're not close until they're close, right? So when you have a close Austrian friend, they're there for you and they love you. And I have many close Austrian friends now that through being able to get past that barrier, I could have said, oh, Austrians are rude and they're not friendly and but I was like, no, I'm gonna, put my bias aside, my model of the world aside. I've only lived in America. I've only lived in California. Like, how could I possibly make assumptions about this? And so I just decided to be like, oh, okay, if that's how Austrians are, then, it's going to take a little while. They're going to have a harder shell and they're going to have, stronger boundaries of who they let in a way that maybe in our culture we wouldn't. I remember being in Trader Joe's and the guy's ringing me up and he's like dancing and what are you going to make tonight? And I'm like, ooh, sweet potatoes with chimichurri. And he's like, oh yeah, and we're like vibing and you have like this whole experience, but that's not part of the culture. So it took me about a year to kind of acclimate. I got a lot of feedback from people who had lived abroad or even in other states. They were like, Lunden, don't make any assumptions or don't, decide if you like it or not until it's been a year. So I really had that in my mind. Also, I was really lucky for the position that I did, that I was working for in Austria. We did what was called live workout parties. So I was able to coach live workout parties all over Europe. We went to Russia, we went to Japan, and it was so wonderful because in these workout parties, we would have a live DJ set. We would do a workout. There would be dancing. I mean, I know you can believe it because you see me in the green room. I've been dancing, but it was so interesting because I remember like when we went to Spain, people were dancing before I even got on stage. Like people were so enthusiastic. Their sweat was like pouring onto me on stage. When I go to Germany, it took me a solid 25 minutes to get them to kind of open up a little bit. Right. And so I got to see that as an opportunity. In NLP, we say, there's no such thing as, bad communicators. There's just inflexible communicators. So I was like, I'm just going to be flexible. I'm going to learn, okay, what do these people need? This is their style. They're a little bit more closed off, but it would be so funny because at the end of the workout parties, I get the same feedback from Germans, from Spanish people, from people in Italy, from people in Japan. That was so much fun. Oh my gosh, I had the best time ever, right? But if I would have judged based on my American limited perspective of what I thought happiness and enjoyment looked like, I would have thought the Germans hated me. But I just excited to go beyond that. And so I think there was, those are just some examples, but yeah, it was such a profound experience to really be able to be like, oh, there are so many amazing people in the world, so many amazing cultures. Every time I would go to a different country, I would fully immerse myself, whether that was, in Japan, sitting on the floor with your shoes off for hot pot, or going into Turkey, into some of those religious temples and being respectful of the clothing that you need to be in and going in and praying there. I just felt like that absolutely changed my life and opened up my brain to something I never would have been exposed to if I would have just stayed in my hometown with my internal representation and my programming, which is my family, for my whole life. And so while I'm very grateful for all of that, I'm so grateful for that experience. And now in 2020, I moved back to America, and my boyfriend lives in North Carolina. So I split my time between California and North Carolina. So to your point, it's also very different, right? Like in California, people are like cool, relaxed, beachy vibes. When you come to the South, they're like, what's up, sugar pie, honey bunches? And you're like, oh, my father, I get all excited. When you go places, they're just that Southern hospitality is something that I didn't know existed if I wouldn't have been here. So I think that overall, exposing ourselves to things that are different than us, especially people, cultures, ways of living. And I think travel is a great modality to do that, I think is the biggest gift that we can give ourselves. And I really believe that this can be triggering for some people, but I think that if you don't travel, you miss out on an aspect of the world and of yourself that you can't unlock otherwise. I don't think, I like to travel. I travel all over all the time. Do I think that everybody has to do that? No, but I think it's important to visit cultures and to interact in countries and to be in spaces that challenge your model of the world and that ruffle your feathers and stir your pot a little bit. So you can have that awareness and be like, oh, where did that come from? That's just me being uncomfortable for no other reason than something's different. And so I think just being abroad, and maybe you experience this too, it's just like there's a lot that's different, and we get to choose if our perspective can be more of our superpower or if it keeps us, locked away in our box or in our prison, if you will. And I was like, no, superpower all the way. And I'm going to participate all the way. And so I think that, even when I left, it was in 2020. I came back because, of course, it was COVID. And in Austria, we had very strict regulations. We had to stay inside. You couldn't leave. And I was kind of like, okay, if I'm going to stay inside and not leave, I want to go kind of do that with my family and be there with my parents. Yeah. And so even when I left, I felt complete. I was like, even though there was a moment where I didn't really, I chose to move back, right? But it was the circumstances. But I remember getting on the plane after, I think it was like 5 or 6 attempts of canceled flights. And I kept getting worried I wasn't going to be able to go home. But I remember getting on the plane. It was pretty much empty. So I had a whole row to myself. I was like, feeling first class and coach, leaning. And I remember thinking like, I really feel complete. I feel like if, it wouldn't have been my choice to, kind of end it there. And kind of the way that I was doing work, they wanted someone local in Austria doing the job that I was doing. So I wasn't able to keep that, and bring it over. But I just remember feeling like very complete and very grateful that I got to have that part. And, yeah. And I think too, coming back to America and separating myself from all of those differences and being around a lot of people who are, when I came back, who were used to my old programming, right? Of course I would visit, but it'd be like holidays, you see people here and there. So then there was another beautiful kind of reintegration process, representing myself to my family, to my friends, to the people that know and love me, and being like, hey, I know we saw each other every year at Christmas while I was gone, but like, I'm a very different person now. And I want you to get to know that version of me too, just like I want to get to know the version of you that I've kind of not missed out on, but just didn't get everyday access to by living abroad. So I think living there was a great experience. And then also coming back with those learnings and reintegrating with the people that I know and love was also another, beautiful challenge too.
I love how you put that, because people do see you how you used to be. I don't care if they see you every day. It's kind of like it's hard for people to imagine and see the growth because they still have a picture of you in their head. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, where it was able to make it almost like a game and fun to sort of like, let's figure each other out. Let's learn each other, like we just met.
Yeah.
I
And
love
it
that.
felt like that with some of my friends too. It did feel like we
Yeah.
were getting to know each other. And I can think of one instance in particular with a dear friend of mine where at this particular moment of recording it, we're still learning how to become friends again,
Yeah.
because we had a conversation that when we got the opportunity to have the conversation, I really felt like I had thought about it a lot. I had practiced, I had rehearsed what I wanted to say in the most honest and respectful way. Because I think we can
Mm-hmm.
say things honestly, but not respectful, or respectful, but not honest.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I said that, we were sharing some of this information, there was a lot of, well, you used to do that. And a lot of the evidence was from like 10 years ago. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. And this is who I am now. And I know that even, there's been instances where you've maybe even in the course of the last 3 years, me being here, I probably have reverted back to that old programming a couple times. But if I look back at the evidence of myself, it's probably like a 95.5%, right? Like sometimes that comes back. And so, I think also what helped a lot, I don't know why I feel called to share the details of this, but whoever's listening, this might be really helpful. But I didn't want her to feel like it was me saying, this is me, and this is how you need to treat me, and this is how you need to be in order to interact with me. I
Mm-hmm.
also, in this process of, re-presenting myself to her, took instances where she was being the example that I wanted to be and made those big. I was like, remember that one time when I said that and you just quickly corrected me and it was no big deal and we just moved on? I go, that was so beautiful. How come when I bring this up to you, it has to be this big explosion? And she was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I was able to kind of do that lateral chunk or that side movement to be like, hey, you did that here. Do you think
Mm-hmm.
you can do that in our friendship too? And the end of the conversation was really like, she had said, okay, I need to swallow this a little bit. I need some time. I need some space. And this was from a friend who since moving back, and even when I lived in Europe and would come back, I'd go visit her regularly. And now
Mm-hmm.
it's been about a year and we haven't spent a lot of time together. But I got a text from her about 3 days ago, just checking in. Just like, we're very much kind of like putting our feet in each other's new ponds, and trying to see how that works. And so
Yeah.
it hasn't just been like, now that I can communicate, this is who I am and let's go. It really is an ongoing kind of layer by layer process. And just because I changed, like, I can't expect that others respect the change in me. They might be like, nope, I like the old Lunden and that's who I
Mm-hmm.
related with. And I love you, but I don't, and that's okay too. People have that choice. But what I do know is that my choice to be who I want to be has so many deep roots in it that it's unwavering, So it's okay if she decides to kind of walk away or be. So I think, yeah, the main message, or like what I'm trying to say here is, when we represent ourselves to people that we love and people that we know love us, it can sometimes be a getting to know each other process. And it can be a moment of like, trial and error and kind of this back and forth. And we get to decide, there's some relationships they dropped off and I let them go. But then there's some that stuck. There were some people that were like, hey, whatever version you are, I want to be friends with that. And then there was the in between of people where I'm like, okay, they might not believe that I am this new person. Maybe I perhaps haven't given them enough evidence that I am this person. I love them enough to keep representing myself until I feel like there's a point where I might need to set boundaries. I don't feel that yet in this particular situation. But yeah, I think there's kind of all that spectrum, the people who are not on board at all, the ones who are fully on board, and then the ones where they want to get to know you so that they can decide. And I think that that's important to highlight too.
I think that's a really good thing to mention, because just because you all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but you learn these skills and you're communicating better, that doesn't mean the whole world comes right with you all happy and let's, link arms. And it doesn't
And some
always work.
people do, but some people
Yeah,
don't. And I think
exactly.
through that learning, I've been more proactive with my friends. Like I have one friend, for example, that I could tell she was going through something, like nothing bad, but there was like some evolution of her happening, and she was a little bit distant from me than more than usual. So I just sent her a message. I was like, hey, I just want to let you know that I noticed and sensed that something's changing in your life. And whatever you're becoming, whoever you're becoming, I want to get to know her too. So when you're ready, I want to know who she is. I want to get to know, and I want to be friends with that version of you too. And I just came out and I was like, that's what I would want to hear. I would want someone to cheer on the new me too, instead of try to hold me down like the crab effect into my old ways. And so maybe somebody listening or watching, maybe you need to send that text to a friend where they're evolving and growing, and it's sticky and it's hard and change can be uncomfortable, but we can just, cheer them on and be like, hey, whoever you're becoming, when you're ready, like I want to get to know her too. And I want to be friends with that version of you, because I want to be friends with you and all the versions, not just that particular, cookie cutter that you might've been in that phase of my life. And so I feel like that's been a helpful phrase to say to my friends to help deepen that connection while they're going through their journey too. Because like a lot of these friends I've had since high school, and it's like, of course, if we're the same person in high school that we are in our 30s, like that's a problem. So I feel like, of course, there's some aspects, right? Like maybe my playfulness or my dancing nature. I've probably always been that way. But yeah, I just really feel
I don't play with Barbies anymore.
Yeah, exactly. There's certain behaviors that have gone, but then there's some where I'm like, hey, I want to be friends with you and all the versions.
I love that. I love that. On that note, we do need to go to one more commercial break. So we're going to be back in just a minute. And when we come back, we are going to talk with Lunden about who she is now, what she's doing, and about her podcast, because I know you guys are going to want to tune in for that. So when we come back, we'll learn more.
Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversation. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
And we're back as I'm like primping and whatever. Let's bring our guest back. Lunden, welcome back to the show. I'm just like,
thank you. I don't know if you saw me when I was in the green room, but I took a sip of my coffee, which I put like cacao at the bottom, and I got a little cacao. So I was like looking to make sure I didn't have anything in my teeth.
I was like, that was
what
blueberries.
During the breaks.
Yeah. Thank goodness for breaks, right? For me, it's always like, wait a second. Right before we come on, I'm like, I think I might have blueberry in my tooth. So I totally relate. But anyway, let's get back to the conversation. I would love for you to share more. I mean, I mentioned before that you have a podcast, and I want to make sure that we talk about that, because even the wisdom that you shared with us today, the nuggets, oh my gosh, truth bombs in the most fabulous way. I want people to be able to learn from you some more and hear from you some more. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Self-Love and Sweat. When I started it, it was much more fitness related because that's where I was in my journey. But now it's so much more like what we're doing here, conversations about our journey and about our triumphs and about turning our pain into purpose and things like that. And so the tagline, or kind of if you listen to my podcast, what I say is it's the place where you get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, break down barriers, and do what sets your soul on fire. And I remember when I wrote that, I just got goosebumps because I was like, that's what I want to do in my life and what I want to inspire others to do. And so, yeah, when I started the podcast, I took a lot of time to get super clear on that and what I wanted that message to be. And gosh, I don't know how you feel. I mean, you're so wonderful at this too, but I just can't imagine not doing my podcast. I can't not do it. It's just like, I have this compelling force that's just like, you have this gift of talking and communicating, Lunden, that cannot be not used. And so, I've just so enjoyed doing it. I've met some of the world's greatest people, at least in my opinion. Like, the world has so many amazing people and so many stories and so much beauty that, if I would have just stayed in my hometown doing my same thing with the sameness, I would have never been exposed to. So I'm just grateful. And I mean, I know you know too, it's just like you plug and go. You just can talk and have a conversation. It's so beautiful. So Self-Love and Sweat is the name of the podcast, and it's available everywhere.
All right, great. That was going to be my question. Is it in all the places?
All the places.
I love it. And then also, I popped up your Instagram handle a couple of times, but what can people find there? Because I'm assuming there's some inspiration and things like that as well.
Yeah, I love Instagram. Oh my gosh, I've been on social media for so long. In fact, I have a lot of friends from Instagram or followers from Instagram. I also call them friends, that they're like, we've been following you since MySpace. And I started MySpace when I was like 17. But it really is, life like Lunden is me just sharing my authentic self in hopes that others can create life like blank, their name. And it's just a lot of coaching, of course, on communication and getting out of your comfort zone and neuro-linguistic programming. But I also really like to dance. So I went line dancing with my friend Gia in Nashville and posted a video on that. It's really just my way of embodying who I am in hopes that it's a little contagious. And that's really what I share on my Instagram. And, it really is just kind of a lot of bits and pieces of me. I think for a while, especially when I lived in Europe, and my title then was the Adidas Runtastic Fitness Coach. And in my brain, no one told me this. I just thought I had to be a certain type of way, and I couldn't do this, and I had to do this, and this is what a fitness coach does and looks like. And when I moved back to America and was able to really get real with myself, I just was able to pull back more of those layers. And so I definitely feel more like me. And so I feel like that's kind of the journey that I share on Life Like Lunden. It's just kind of raw, unfiltered, who I am, love it or hate it. Hopefully it inspires you to, embrace your perfect imperfections and get out of your comfort zone and just be a participant of life. I think people stand on the sidelines so much with so much fear of what people might think or what's going to happen. I just really hope that whatever I put out on the internet helps people just kind of jump out a little bit more. Hopefully it just pushes them in the deep end a little bit and forces them to kind of get out there. I think that the world needs more people out in the arena.
Yes, absolutely. Get off the stands. Let's get into the arena. I love that. Brené Brown.
Yeah, totally. And the quote that she uses from, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena. In fact, I had a guest on my podcast who he does the whole man in the arena. Him and his daughter can recite the whole thing from memory. And so when I think of that, it's not about the people in the naysayers in the, nosebleed section. It's the one who actually shows up every day.
Exactly. And, I think that a lot of people do, like, you said you had this idea of being, what a fitness coach should look like and what this is supposed to be. And nobody even said that to you. I think most people do that. We decide, okay, this is what's expected of me, instead of like, this is actually me.
Yeah. And of course I was influenced by some things, right? Like, of course there's like, at the time, and even now, there's fitness magazines of what, fitness cover models look like, right? Or like what fitness people do or do not do. And I just crafted based on autopilot of receiving information without awareness, without checking my filter. And I just created what I thought it could be and what I thought it was supposed to be. And I just remember when I look back now, I didn't know it at the time, but when I look back now, I'm like, no wonder she was so exhausted. Yeah, I was working a lot and traveling a ton for my job, whatever, but it's so exhausting to wear a mask of what you think you're supposed to be. And in NLP, we craft who you think you want to be. We do core values. We get very clear on who you do want to be. And so when I was able to kind of slow down and get clear on who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up, I was able to look back and be like, oh, yeah, no wonder she was exhausted and fatigued and felt, a lot of different feelings, because I was wearing a mask that I didn't even know I had on, that I put on because I thought I was supposed to,
Yes, exactly. And it's kind of like, it's exhausting because, you sit there and you think about energy as something that you either have or you don't. I'm telling you right now, you could be tired and sickly and sad and all that, and you find out you won $1 million. You think you're going to say something like, I'm too tired, I'm too sick, I'll celebrate later. No, you are going to be celebrating and so excited, full of energy, so it doesn't really work that way. So
yeah, agreed. And I just did this really wonderful activity with one of my clients this morning. In terms of like energy, is like this battery activity. And we list kind of like, your believers, the people that are your coaches, your mentors, and then also the vampires and the haters and being able to look at, okay, how am I showing up, but who am I allowing in my sphere too, when it comes to, who I'm allowing to take my energy or give me energy. And so I really like that activity of listing like who charges your battery and who's like maybe draining your battery a little bit. And not to say that, people that are charging versus draining are good or bad. It just allows us to look and have very, right in our face, look in that mirror and be like, okay, this might be why I feel a little off or I feel a little drained, because when I look at not only how I'm presenting myself, but how I'm allowing people to present themselves to me in my life, I can see why I might be more drained or not. And so I think becoming, good at managing our energy is really, really important, and doing things that fuel and fulfill us and give us energy and give us life is so important.
It is important. And, I want to keep going back to this idea of the mask. It's like we have this idea of, why not be brave enough to let it down for a minute and really let people in? It might.
Yeah.
You can always put it back up if you need to, I guess. But it's so much more freeing just to be, because you're not going to please everybody anyway. So you might as well please yourself.
Yeah. And I think maybe someone listening or watching is like, well, I don't really know how I want to be, or like what this might look like. And I'll tell you, it does feel a little bit robotic at first, like you feel a little bit like, okay, who do I want to be and how do they show up? And so as I was taking off this mask, it's like emotional rawness. You feel exposed and you're not quite sure, and so it's like you're trying it on. You practice, you decide, you get your core values. You say, okay, one of my core values is honesty. Okay, well, what does honesty look like? What does honesty not look like? And when do I need to set boundaries when it comes to honesty? Okay, now that I know that, I got to put my body out in the world and be that. And to go out and embody that. And then just like the flip off and the bad words of the person in the car when they might cut you off, it's like sometimes you go in and you show up as this person that you want to be, and you're like, wait, no, scratch that. Let me try again. And that's why I think talking about the battery and who we're surrounding ourselves with, when we're taking off that mask and when we're trying on new ways of being, it's so much better when you have people that are like a good solid foundation who are supporting the removal of the mask.
I love that. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left. I know. Can you believe it? So is there anything that you'd love to share with the audience before we wrap up? Or even reiterate something. That's always good too.
Yeah, I think that one thing I want to say that I think is really important is that change is okay and change is necessary. And I grew up thinking that if you changed, it meant that you were, like, if you changed, it meant that, it meant that you were being fake. It meant that the person you were now and all the versions, those were fake versions, because that was a real version of you. And I just feel like if you're not changing, if you can't look back at your previous self and not even recognize that person, then we still got to go to work. And I still feel that way too. There's still parts of me, there's certain, in my current romantic relationship that I'm in, we're like mirrors for each other. There's certain things that pop up where I'm like, okay. No, I'm actually not proud of that part. There's not much difference between me now and that, but I love that feeling of looking back and being like, oh, I love her so much, but we are worlds apart. And I think that people get so tied to, I have to be this way. And if I say I believed this, but now I believe this, oh my gosh. But I think that change and evolution and growing our beliefs and becoming more of who we're supposed to become, even to the point of it being unrecognizable to the person that we ever thought we could be, I think that is freaking amazing. So if anyone's hesitating to change or to take that next step because you're afraid who's going to be on board, who's not, like as long as you're on board to who you're becoming, you'll get so much back, whether it's new people that you meet, new opportunities, that $1 million you talked about, right? When we step into, that arena to be like, okay, it doesn't matter. This feels congruent to me and I'm going to change because change for me is what I need. I just feel like that's gold. So I just don't ever want people to stay stagnant.
Yes, that's like death. So yeah, I 100% appreciate that. Well, Lunden, thank you so much for being on the show today. You are an absolute joy. And like I said before, so many nuggets of wisdom. So thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are very much appreciated. And everyone, that is all the time that we have for today. We will see you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your week.